Hey YouTube, thanks for joining. Recently I was thinking about a fun way I could spend my long 4th of July weekend while maintaining social distancing, and I had a crazy idea. I said, Castlewood is one of the most popular state parks in Missouri, but I've only run a few of the trails there. What if I filmed every single trail at Castlewood and made a killer Castlewood compilation video for YouTube? And that's pretty much what I ended up doing. But as this progressed, it turned into much more. What I created ended up being a comprehensive guide to the trails of Castlewood. I ran on well-kept trails, remote, overgrown trails, had run-ins with ticks, spiders, got lost, and ran up more hills than I thought possible in the summer heat. So learn from my pain. If you're planning to visit Castlewood this summer, perhaps this guide can help you find a part of the park you haven't explored before. Or if you love Castlewood, you're just going to see great footage of all the spots you know and love. It's a win-win. Castlewood is a little weird in that you can't get to all the trails by visiting the main Castlewood Park. Some trails are accessed in other places, so the adventure would be divided up into 3 runs on 3 separate days. The first day, I would tackle all the trails that are accessed from the main Castlewood Park and recreation area on Kiefer Creek Road. The second day, I would tackle the Castlewood Loop, which is located south of the Merrimack River and accessed through Lone Elk State Park. The third day, I would tackle the 2 trails to the west of the main Castlewood Park area, which all branch off of the Al Foster Trail and are accessed via Sherman Beach Park. Let's take a look at day 1. I started my journey with the River Scene Trail, accessed by going west on the trailhead off of Kiefer Creek Road. This is by far the most popular and most crowded trail at Castlewood. This is one of the only trails that I had run prior to this video, so I knew that there were some big hill climbs up ahead, but I figured I'd get them out of the way early. What I didn't realize is that 3 of the other trails I'd be running have equal or greater elevation gain than this first trail, so I was in for some fun. This trail leads to some of Castlewood's most popular beaches, where people hang out in the water and swim, even though swimming is highly discouraged, as you can see from all the signs. Also, as you'll see, this trail has some of the best views at Castlewood after you climb up to the top of the bluffs. The last time I had been at Castlewood is in December, and I filmed this same trail. I was comparing the footage and noticed how different the view becomes here when you don't have any leaves on the trees. Because of how crazy the difference is, I decided to intercut some footage of winter at various points along the River Scene Trail so you could see the differences. You get 2 totally different experiences in the winter versus the summer. One of the more memorable parts of Castlewood is this part here where you cross under the train tracks and then go up this huge set of stairs. I kind of consider the climbs on the Riverside Trail as 3 or 4 separate hills because they're spread out over the course of a mile. The first part of the climb with the stairs amounts to about a 150-foot elevation gain. The next one's about 73 feet, and then 2 more of about 40 feet each. The net elevation gain for the Riverside Trail is about 210 feet, making this a huge climb. One of the main places where the season makes a big difference in visibility is when you're on the top of these bluffs. You can really see the difference here looking at this winter footage again. And clocking in at just over 3 miles, the Riverside Trail is complete. Let's talk pros and cons of the Riverside Trail. First, the pros. This trail is extremely well kept and easy to navigate. There's basically a 0% chance that you're going to get lost if you follow the signs. Also, this trail has some of the best views at the park. There are about 4 or 5 overlooks up at the top of the bluffs that give you a great view of the Merrimack River. Now the cons. This is the most crowded trail at Castlewood. If you come on a weekend or a holiday or a nice day in the spring, fall, or summer, there's going to be a lot of people on the trail. Also, the terrain on the bluffs is a little rocky, so be careful and pay attention. But honestly, that kind of goes for every hill climb at Castlewood. And final takeaways for the River Scene Trail. If you haven't ever been to Castlewood before, this is the trail to start out on. It has the views that make this place super popular, and it's a very safe trail. Next up is the Grotpeter Trail. The Grotpeter Trail is a 4.2-mile loop that circles much of the north side of the Castlewood Park. 4.2 miles makes it the longest trail at the main Castlewood Park. I entered the trail at the trailhead closest to the entrance to the park and went clockwise around the trail. The very first stretch of the trail before you cross Kiefer Creek Road was a pleasant, flat stretch through some varied scenery. There were grassy open areas, parts that went through the woods, and also cool views of this creek, which we're going to get more familiar with later when we run the Lone Wolf Trail. Also, it's nice and flat, unlike what we're going to see in a second. When you cross Kiefer Creek Road, you're up against one of the most insane uphills in the St. Louis area. Clocking in at 170 feet, this thing was brutal. But surprisingly, there are 2 other hills at Castlewood that beat it, which you're going to see later. Also, immediately after reaching the peak of this hill, you descend, and 0.2 miles later, you're on another 100-foot uphill. It was rough, but very doable. For me, psychologically speaking, this was a worse hill than the River Scene because it's more condensed. But technically, I think the River Scene Trail had more elevation gain overall. After you get through that initial elevation gain, though, that's about it. The rest of the trail is basically flat in comparison. One of the things I noticed on this trail is that it seems like a great trail for mountain biking. I saw some mountain bikers, which I think confirmed my suspicion. I didn't come across any great overlooks on this trail similar to what we saw on the River Scene, but it's possible that I missed some. There were many connectors and side trails that I didn't go down. Let's talk pros and cons of the Grotpeter Trail. First, the pros. Just like the River Scene Trail, this is a very easy trail to navigate. There are signs everywhere and the path is very well maintained, so it's very easy not to get lost. Next, there are many connectors, so you can shorten your trip or make your trip longer if you want to. Also, this trail is less crowded with foot traffic than the River Scene Trail. But the first con, while there is less foot traffic, there's definitely more mountain bike traffic. Some of the mountain bikers go pretty fast around the corners, especially if you're in a downhill section. This obviously is not a con if you're a mountain biker, but as a pedestrian, you're a little bit vulnerable. Next, the hill at the beginning was brutal. It looks like you would face a big hill at the beginning whether you go clockwise like I did or counterclockwise. So there's really no escaping it, but I would definitely rather a hill climb at the beginning than a descent at the beginning. And the final con, there wasn't as great a sights and scenery as some of the other trails at the park. It's mostly just wooded trail running, except for the beginning part of the trail south of Kiefer Creek Road. The bottom line is, this is a great running trail, but maybe not such a great sightseeing trail. If you want to beef up your mileage after or before doing the River Scene, this is a great place to do it. If you want to have a trail run or a hike without the crowd, this is a great alternative to the more crowded parts of the park. Onwards to the final trail of day 1. The final trail of day 1 is the Lone Wolf Trail, which I actually entered off of a connector from the Grotpeter Trail. At the time, I did not realize that the Lone Wolf had a dedicated trailhead, which was a little south of where I started, but the connector did lead to some cool scenery, which you'll see. The Lone Wolf Trail is basically just an alternate route up the bluffs that we visited on the River Scene Trail. That's right, I'd be climbing back up that first hill. Lone Wolf Trail did seem to have some unique sights compared to the other two. Definitely more to see than the Grotpeter Trail. And because of its position, it seems like the Lone Wolf Trail would be the optimal choice if you wanted to add just a little extra mileage after you finish the River Scene Trail. Let's talk pros and cons. First pro, as I mentioned, I really liked the scenery on the Lone Wolf Trail. It was just a little bit different than the River Scene and definitely different from the Grotpeter. There were rocks that you're kind of going over as you're ascending up the bluff. The creek part was cool, just good scenery overall. The second pro, while you are climbing the same hill as the River Scene, it seems much more gradual. You can see here that it's a big climb of about 200 feet. I didn't notice it as much because it's so spread out. The third pro, once again, Lone Wolf is a clean-cut trail that is easy to follow, just like the other two trails at the main park. And I think I have just one con for this trail. It's really the second most crowded after the River Scene, so you can definitely expect to run into people on foot and on mountain bikes on this trail. Day one was just about complete. I'd run just about 10 miles of trails and things were going well. I hadn't gotten lost, no ticks, no heat stroke, but these clean-cut trails at the main park definitely were giving me a false impression of what was up ahead. I had no idea yet what was in store for me on some of the more obscure trails that I'd be tackling in the next couple of days. Things were about to get interesting. Here we are at day 2. Today we're going to be going down to Lone Elk State Park so that we can access the Chubb Trail, which leads us to the Castlewood Loop. While geographically we are very close to the main Castlewood Park where we were yesterday, because of the river, it's about a 30-minute drive to get to this trailhead. Lone Elk State Park is a pretty cool place that's worth checking out on its own. It's a nature preserve where you can drive or hike around an area with a bunch of elk, and there's a bison area where you can see bison in the wild, up close and personal, from the safety of your car. The day I drove through for this run, there weren't any bison out, but here's a video I shot a few days before. If you keep going straight on this main road instead of turning into Lone Elk Park, you're going to pass the Wild Bird Sanctuary, and then you're going to get to the parking area for the Chubb Trail. From the Chubb Trailhead, it is 1.5 miles to the Castlewood Loop. First thing I noticed here is how much of a downhill we were starting out with. Trail running physics come to mind. Whatever goes down must come up. Day 2 is where I started to see the more remote side of Castlewood, and I definitely had some incorrect assumptions going in. First, I was expecting this to be an easy run. This ended up being much more difficult than I anticipated. Second, I was expecting something more along the lines of the clean and easy to follow trails that we saw yesterday at the main park. I was very wrong. This trail was much more remote than what we'd seen so far, and as a result, there were some unique challenges. As advertised, after traveling 1.5 miles into the woods, you find the trailhead for the Castlewood Loop. I decided to go counterclockwise around the loop. Would have been a very different run had I gone the other way. If you go counterclockwise like I did, you tackle the wooded section of the trail first. This wooded section is really pleasant. It's at the bottoms of the Merrimack River, so this trail is perpetually muddy from what I've read. And you'll also notice this trail is much more rugged than the ones at the main park. The trail is overgrown at spots and has many downed branches. All in all though, the wooded section was not difficult to follow, and it's mostly flat, which can be nice. The forest scenery was cool, and it was a little bit different than what you see at the main park. It was much quieter, much more remote. This section of the trail would be great for a nice, quiet, peaceful, flat hike through the woods. At about the 3/4 of a mile mark from the trailhead, you get close enough to the Merrimack River to start getting some cool river views. We're basically directly across the river from where we were yesterday on the River Scene Trail. This is also the section of the trail where it really starts to get overgrown. There were a few spider webs. It was very manageable though. Now is a good time to talk about trail running equipment and attire. If you're going to run or hike on this trail, long socks and bug spray are an absolute requirement. I actually wear compression socks when I do trail runs because they're really good against ticks. Also, I highly recommend a water pack. I use the Osprey Duro, which carries 1.5 liters of water. Especially in the summertime, it is important to take more water than you think you need. Don't even try this type of run in the summer without a water pack. More water than you think you need is a requirement in case you get lost, which is very easy on a trail like this one. You will now see why. About 1 mile from the trailhead, you get this open grassy area. At first, it seems like a really cool change of scenery, and it is. But this part of the trail was an absolute disaster. First, the grass is pretty tall, and the trail is immediately much more difficult to follow. But in these beginning sections, it's really not too hard. After a little while, I got to this section where you get a great view of the river. Great view, but only problem is, where did the trail go? Looking all around and also checking my GPS, the trail just seemed to vanish from where I thought it would be. I later figured out where the trail really was. The real trail is completely overgrown and goes through this grass. I was perplexed for a few minutes. I eventually found this side trail and decided to try that out. Here is where I really get messed up on my direction. Up ahead, the trail is way too overgrown to keep going, and I see this sign pointing to the north. To me, it seemed like I needed to follow this sign and head north. Little did I realize, I was backtracking through the overgrown main section of the trail, heading further away from the trailhead. Going through this tall grass totally sucked. I made it out of the tall grass and was back to that area with the really good view of the river, but I had just gone in a complete circle and I had no clue where the real trail was. I was totally done running through tall grass, and I made the decision to just double back through the comparatively clear and easy to follow wooded trail. Let's talk pros and cons of the Castlewood Loop. Pros? It's remote, so it's not crowded like the main Castlewood Park. I didn't run into anybody when I was out here, so if you like seclusion, this is the trail for you. It's also really flat, except for that beginning portion on the Chubb Trail. The wooded portion of the Castlewood Loop is an easy run. There's just a few spots of mud and a few tree branches to contend with, but it's overall very pleasant. On to the cons. Con 1. This is the most remote trail at Castlewood, so if you have a problem, like you get lost or you run out of water or you get injured, it's going to be tough to get help. So take a hydro pack, take a friend, know the route well ahead of time, and make sure you have a navigation option to fall back on, like a good GPS. Con 2, the trail is overgrown, and that makes it tough to follow, as we have discussed. Con 3, there will be an excessive amount of spiders and ticks because of how overgrown it is. Make sure you have long socks, a hat, and bug spray. And the final con, the descent at the beginning, which results in the hill climb at the very end, is my personal least favorite elevation profile for a trail. And it did, in fact, suck climbing 200 feet at the very end of the run. The plan for day 3 is to hit the last 2 Castlewood trails, which are accessed via a non-Castlewood trail called the Al Foster. I parked at Sherman Beach to start my journey. The plan was to hop on the stinging Nettle trail, which sounded very questionable, then to take that to the Al Foster trail, which I would use to get to the Cedar Bluff trail. I was anticipating about a 7-mile run and hoping things would go a little smoother than they did the day before. The first thing I noticed was how cool Sherman Beach is. I saw many beachgoers walking around, so it seems like a pretty popular summer spot. Just judging by my first impression, if I was looking for a good beach on the Merrimack to hang out at, I'd probably pass up Castlewood and come here. I mean, there's a lot of space, it's easily accessible, and the view is really cool. Onto the stinging Nettle Trail. Right from the start of the trail, you have great views of the river. The trail is really well kept and easy to follow. The terrain was great. There were slight uphills and downhills, little bridges to go over. All the while, you have great views of the river. Scenery-wise, this trail is great. This reminded me of a better version of the Castlewood Loop. This trail also seemed like it would be perfect for mountain biking. Overall, I really loved the stinging Nettle Trail. The only real con I could come up with is that it's far away from the other trails at Castlewood. But honestly, no real complaints. We are now approaching the trailhead for the Cedar Bluff Loop. This area was pretty spooky. There was some trash that people had dumped in the woods, and the trail was instantly a little more overgrown. Then you get to this tunnel. This long tunnel crosses under the train tracks and is just a little claustrophobic. It's probably only about 5 feet tall, so you have to crouch as you go through. It's very creepy. From here, you are on the Cedar Bluff Loop and you're going to be climbing. Now we're climbing the Cedar Bluff. For a 2 or 2.5 mile trail, this is a really tough one for a number of reasons. The Cedar Bluff Trail has the most climbing out of any trail at Castlewood. I went counterclockwise around the trail. The first climb, which happens over the first half mile, has you climbing 210 feet. Then you descend that. It's been another half mile climbing the same height. This trail is a true test of your endurance. Not only are you climbing big hills, but there are huge ruts in the trail, overgrown sections, rocky sections, and worst of all, there's spiders and ticks everywhere. This is another one where long socks, bug spray, and a hat is crucial. I didn't see any cool overlooks on the Cedar Bluff Loop. It is very possible, though, that I missed one. I was very focused on staying on the trail since it was my first time out and considering yesterday's experiences, so I could have easily passed the overlook. The section blocked by the bench in particular seems like it might have led to something cool, and in hindsight, I really should have gone up, but I didn't. After you ascend the first hill and descend back down, before tackling the second hill, you're in the most overgrown, muddy, and spider-ridden section of them all. As you can see, though, it is extremely beautiful, but it's a tough run, both physically and mentally. In many areas, the trail is just torn up. I'm not sure if it's mountain bikes or horses or what. Before you know it, you're on top of that second hill and you're descending again. And I found this area kind of hard to navigate. There are some branches off the trail that are unmarked, so you might need to look at your GPS to know which way to go. I got turned around a few times, but I was pretty easily able to find my way back to the correct trail. When you're descending, it's pretty smooth sailing. You basically just head back out the way you came in and you get back on the Al Foster Trail. And the Al Foster Trail is straight as an arrow back to Sherman Beach. My Castlewood adventure was coming to a close. Soon I will have completed every single trail at the park. I'll share my trail ranking at the end, but first let's talk pros and cons of the Cedar Bluff Trail. First, the pros. There is some cool scenery here, and it has kind of a unique, creepy vibe to it, which is actually kind of cool in a way. Another pro, if you're looking for a challenging run, this trail is for you. It is truly a challenge, and the hills are brutal. It is the most brutal hill experience at Castlewood. Now on to the cons. First con, the trail is not well kept. There are ruts in the trail, it is overgrown in many places. There are spiders everywhere, and there are more ticks than I experienced on any of the other trails at Castlewood. The other thing, I didn't see a big payoff for climbing the huge hills. There's no overlooks or anything similar to what you see on the river scene, unless I missed it, which is possible. And also, this trail is not easy to navigate. I got slightly lost a few times, but nothing compared to the Castlewood Loop. And with that, we have explored every trail at Castlewood. You are now an expert. I'm going to do one final ranking of the trails from what I see as the best to the worst. The top spot goes to the River Scene Trail. If you visit one trail at Castlewood, this is the one to see. It may be super crowded, that's because it's got the best views. Next, the number 2 slot is a tie between the Lone Wolf Trail and the Stinging Nettle Trail. The Lone Wolf Trail is a great extender for either the Grotpeter or the River Scene, so I would definitely add that in if you're at the main park and you can handle the extra miles. The Stinging Nettle Trail has the best riverside scenery, and it's right by Sherman Beach, which seems like just a cooler version of the beach at Castlewood. If you want an extra challenge, add in the Cedar Bluff Trail like I did. The number 4 spot goes to the Grotpeter Trail. While it doesn't have as great as scenery, it's a great, well-kept trail that's easy and fun to run. Number 5 would be the Cedar Bluff Loop. It's just creepy and difficult, but it might be your top pick if you're looking for some challenging hill climbing. And coming in last place is the Castlewood Loop. The wooded part is very passable and kind of a neat trail, but it's just really hard to get to, and that open grassy area is the hardest to follow trail that I've been on in recent memory. Plus, I got super lost. Going through the tall grass was my least favorite part of this whole Castlewood journey. And that brings us to a close. We have explored all the trails of Castlewood and talked about which ones are the best and which ones are the worst. I hope everyone was either entertained or learned something, maybe a little bit of both. If you disagree, leave a comment and let me know how I screwed up when I was running these trails, because I definitely anticipate going back. Also, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. I have many more videos where I explore many more cool areas in the St. Louis area, and I hope to expand that to other areas as well. Thank you.